Yato is a freelancing god whose price starts and ends at 5 yen. We see him answer a prayer to kill a giant phantom snake, which has been causing a girl some extreme anxiety. Evil phantoms are dead creatures in the spiritual realm that feed off of humans. He kills the snake using a small knife, and after the battle ends, the knife transforms into an apparently normal girl. It turns out she's a regalia. These are the phantoms that serve gods and become their weapons at times of need. Regalia are people who were once normal humans. When they die and become spirits, they are sent to the far shore. In other words, the realm of spirits. This is where the gods can choose to have some good spirits serve as their regalia. Yato's regalia leaves him, and this sets him up on a task to search for a new spirit. Yato comes across a girl who could see him. This is rare, as normal humans can't really see gods normally. She tries to save him from a truck and ends up getting hit herself. Yato visits the hospital she gets admitted to check up on her. Turns out she's fine. However, she can now enter the realm of spirits sometimes without having control over it. The girl requests Yato to fix this issue, and Yato decides to help her out, even though he has no clue how to help. However, Yato must find a new regalia for himself before he can be of any help to this girl. Hiyori, the girl, tries to help Yato in search of a new regalia, but she just ends up bringing an evil phantom in front of Yato. They both run for their lives as Yato doesn't have a regalia to fight. Luckily, Yato spots a small wandering spirit from a distance. He immediately makes a contact with him that officially deems the spirit as Yato's new regalia. Yato defeats the phantom with one slash from his new blade. His new regalia is a boy named Yukine. Yato, along with his new regalia, gets summoned by another god. This god is the god of learning, and unlike Yato, his business is actually thriving. Since he has his hands tied up with other matters, he asks Yato to clean up an area swimming with evil phantoms. After arriving at this corrupted place, Yato realizes that these people are committing suicide because of these phantoms. Yato thinks that suicide is an unforgivable sin, and he doesn't want to help these people. However, Hiyori sets out to help them. This forces Yato to action as well. In the end, Hiyori gets herself into trouble and Yato has to save her. After that, they save a boy from committing suicide under the influence of these phantoms. Eventually, they decide to help clear out the area swarming with these phantoms. Not long after, Yato decides to introduce some of his old pals to Hiyori. It was none other than Kofuku, the goddess of poverty. They all have a good time, and Yato tells Hiyori to return to Kofuku in case anything were to happen to him. Yato gets summoned by a guy who needs his help. He's actually trying to commit suicide because he lost all his wealth, trying to keep his girlfriend happy. The girlfriend is revealed to be Kofuku herself, and Yato immediately knew what to do to erase his depression. Yato decided to erase all of his memories of Kofuku, as that's the thing holding him back from leading a healthy and normal life. As he goes back and confronts Kofuku about this, he tells her never to see this man again. Before they leave Kofuku's place, Kofuku tells Hiyori a disturbing truth about Yato. According to her, Yato is actually a very scary god. He used to bring about destruction wherever he set foot in the past. However, Hiyori still chooses to stick with him, as he seems like a changed god now. In the near future, Hiyori decides to take care of Yukine for Yato. Yukine is fairly young, and seeing as how Yato can't even feed the both of them, Hiyori feels concern for him. Things don't go as planned, and Hiyori soon loses control of Yukine. Yukine starts doing immoral acts like stealing from the human world. This infuriates Yato as he's able to sense Yukine's intentions being his master. Although Yato decides to let his behavior slide, Yukine soon comes across the spirit of a dead girl. He feels sympathetic towards her, but it turns out the poor girl is being controlled by a phantom. Yato arrives, sensing his regalia to be in danger, and quickly has him transform into a sword. Yukine felt hesitant slicing the phantom down, knowing that the girl was trapped inside it. Yato quickly reminds him that the only way for the girl to be at peace is if they get rid of her, along with the phantom. Even though Yukine couldn't get it together, Yato still uses him to kill the phantom against his will. Soon after these events, Yato gets confronted by his greatest arch-enemy, Bishamon. She's been hunting him for a while because Yato once killed one of her regalia. Yato tries to battle her using Yukine, however he isn't at full power. Yukine is having doubts about his master killing the girl possessed by the phantom. Since the bond between a god and his regalia is now weakened, Yato also grows weak. He has no choice but to flee from Bishamon to survive. Eventually, he realizes that he can't outrun her. Despite his weakness, he decides to take her out as soon as possible. However, Bishamon has multiple regalia at her service, so she gets the edge in the battle quickly. Out of nowhere, Kofuku appears to help Yato. She opens up a portal from which multiple phantoms can arrive. Yato uses this as a diversion to escape from the area. As the story continues further, Yukine still can't help but to do mischievous acts. One of Bishamon's regalia notices this and goes to meet Hiyori. He tells Hiyori to control or punish Yukine for his immoral acts. If he continues this any further, it could mean that Yato is going to die. It's one of the consequences the god must face for his regalia's actions. This concerns Hiyori, but she doesn't do much to stop Yukine, as she doesn't think his actions could get much worse. She soon realizes how wrong she was. Turns out Yukine soon realizes what he craves most in his life, and it's his desire to be alive again, to breathe amongst real people, to have friends, and to live a normal life. He realizes how unjust life has been to him. This sorrow soon turns to anger, and Yukine starts doing all kinds of evil things. Hiyori immediately comes to him and tells him to stop. She carries Yato to Kofuku's place as he's in a dying condition now. Kofuku reveals the only way for Yato to survive is for Yukine to be punished, and the punishment must be carried out by 3 other regalia. They immediately find 2 more regalias and start the ablution ritual. It was very painful for Yukine as he was actually turning into an evil phantom, although he eventually accepts his sins and returns to normal. Yato later reveals that he didn't punish Yukine earlier because he didn't consider it the best way of going about changing the pain in his heart. Not long after these events, an old friend of Yato appears in town. His name is Rabo. He wishes to challenge Yato to a fight to the death, but he soon realizes that Yato has gotten very weak. He has Nora, his regalia, steal some memories of Hiyori, and promises to return them only if Yato fights him at his full power. Yato goes to the shrine to challenge Rabo, but Rabo is not impressed. He still feels like it's not the Yato he fought alongside years ago. Eventually he realizes that it's his love for Hiyori that has softened him up, and decides to remove all of Hiyori's memories right in front of him. This enrages Yato and he kicks Rabo so hard that he's sent flying into rocks far away. This puts a smile on Rabo's face as he finally witnesses the old Yato after a long time. They both have a long fight, but Yato dominates Rabo completely and eventually kills him. Rabo's last words were about how he felt empty in times of peace. No one wishes death upon each other now. As gods of calamity, both Yato and Rabo used to kill people for a living, and in the modern era they were both purposeless. Rabo thanks Yato for being the one to kill him. Later on, Yato requests Hiyori to destroy all ties with him, as Yato causes nothing but pain to her. Hiyori refuses, as she considers Yato a dear friend. Yato agrees to grant this wish for 5 yen, to which Hiyori happily agrees. Hiyori officially becomes a high school student, but her days in high school don't start very well. Yato pulls a pretty cheeky trick on her. He possesses her body and starts advertising his services as a god to every student. They eventually come across a student who is possessed by a phantom. The student tries to attempt suicide. Luckily, Yato manages to stop him and kills the phantom. However, this time around, Yato suffers some injury and gets his shoulder broken. Hiyori continues her next day of high school with a really bad reputation, but it's something that she has to live with. As spring arrives, Hiyori invites every god she knows to a flower viewing party. However, there was a slight error in her calculation, as Bishamon and Yato don't get along too well. In the heat of the moment, Yato and Bishamon end up having a drinking competition. Surprisingly, Bishamon ends up revealing some of her hidden feelings in her drunken state. It turns out that deep down, Bishamon has a lot of guilt that she hides. She blames herself for the death of her class and wants to change many other things in the past. Yato responds to the condition quite foolishly as he was pretty drunk himself. The 2 gods end up having a brawl at the end of the party. The next day, Yukine comes across a magazine. As it turns out, the magazine contains a questionnaire for Yukine about whether he likes being Yato's regalia. Yato was actually hiding this from him for quite some time, as it's his greatest fear that Yukine might try to leave him. Luckily though, Yukine decides to stay with Yato despite all that he's had to go through being with him. And rightfully so, Yato receives a slight punishment for hiding the questionnaire form from Yukine. Eventually, they rescue a young girl being infected by a phantom. Meanwhile, Bishamon also saves an innocent person from a phantom. Yato just tells Yukine to avoid Bishamon at all costs. Bishamon soon falls ill because she feels the pain of her regalia who was injured. Kugaha, one of Bishamon's regalia, tells her a secret, and it's the fact that Kazuma helped in the ablution of Yukine. However, Kazuma is one of the closest people to Bishamon, so she refuses to believe it. Even though Yato and Bishamon don't get along at all, Yukine still makes Suzuha his friend. Suzuha is actually one of Bishamon's regalia. Despite having masters that hate each other, Suzuha and Yukine become good friends. Suzuha tells Yukine about a girl who meets her every summer. However, each time she visits, she has no memory of Suzuha, since people from the far shore are really hard to see. And even if someone notices them, they forget about them very quickly. This concerns Yukine as Hiyori is also a human and there's always a chance she might forget everything about them when she turns normal. Meanwhile, Kugaha is planning against Bishamon. He gets Suzuha killed. As Suzuha's master, Bishamon senses the death of her regalia. Kuzuma gathers all the regalia in hopes of picking out the culprit. However, he fails to make any valid conclusions about the culprit. Meanwhile, Kugaha tries to attack Yato as well, although Yato, being a god, defeats him easily. He reveals how his main goal is to kill Bishamon. Meanwhile, Bishamon confronts Kazuma about Yato's ablution. She didn't want to believe it, but as it turns out, what she heard was absolutely true. Kazuma did help Yato with the ablution. Even though it's a hard decision for her, Bishamon isn't one to be indecisive. She exiles Kazuma without much regret in her eyes. After being abandoned, Kazuma seeks refuge with Kofuku and Daikoku. Although under the order of Kugaha, Aiha attacks them. Alongside Kugaha, she kidnaps Kazuma and steals the soul of Hiyori. After being imprisoned, Kazuma decides to tell the full story of why Yato and Bishamon hate each other. He explains how all of Bishamon's regalias were once corrupted by a phantom. Bishamon wouldn't give up on them, so as the master of those regalias, she endangered herself to death. Kazuma asked Yato to kill all of the infected regalias behind Bishamon's back. Bishamon still doesn't know how Kazuma was behind all of this. She still thinks that Yato murdered those regalia in cold blood. Meanwhile, Yato thinks Hiyori is captured by Bishamon and starts attacking her after finding her. Little did she know that it was not Bishamon behind the kidnapping, but rather one of her regalia, Kugaha, who had betrayed her. Kugaha actually wishes to kill Bishamon given the opportunity so he could reincarnate and use her power. In their battle, as Bishamon is just about to kill Yato, Yukine jumps in his place to protect him. This leaves him with a fatal blow. Because of his loyalty, Yukine becomes a blessed vessel. The fight continues and eventually Kugaha and Aiha end up on the losing side. Bishamon tries to attack Yato as she still hates him, but this time around Kazuma takes the attack from him. Bishamon kills Kazuma instead. Even though Bishamon got rid of Kazuma, it seemed like she still had a soft spot for him. She clearly goes into a state of deep sorrow after witnessing him bear life-threatening injuries. Kazuma also tells Bishamon the truth about why Yato killed the regalias in the past. Eventually, Kazuma survives and feels bad about the way things panned out. He felt like he deserves punishment for letting Bishamon down. However, Bishamon was willing to make Kazuma her regalia again, knowing that people make mistakes. Everything goes back to normal for now as the battle had been won and the soul of Hiyori was returned. As Yukine became a blessed vessel now, he started attracting a lot of gods. Ebisu, one of the 7 gods of fortune, comes to Yato and offers him a huge sum of money in exchange for Yukine. Despite the tempting offer, Yukine and Yato both decide to stick together and just continue with their adventures updated. After all the hard work Yato realizes he's been through, he realizes that he still doesn't have a shrine. This makes him depressed as gods that are forgotten in the human world would disappear. Eventually, Hiyori decides to make a shrine for Yato to acknowledge his hard work. This means a lot for Yato because the shrine also gets approved by Kamagahara, the heavenly realm. Soon after, Yato meets up with Nora, who is another regalia that's still his to use. However, it's been a while since he called her to do anything. He decides to meet up with her and release her from the contract for regalia. But she has one final request. Yato must rescue a conjurer from the underworld as his last job. There's a chance of the conjurer being none other than Ebisu himself. In pursuit of this task, Yato even goes missing for a month. Eventually, Yato finds Ebisu in the underworld. As it turns out, he's in search of acquiring the Locution Brush. It will allow him to control all the phantoms of the world and people will be able to lead a better life that way. However, to get to this point, Ebisu had to commit a lot of sins. All the remaining gods of fortune are captured in Takamgahara to lure out Ebisu, so he could be punished for his crimes. Together, they plan to free those gods and make an escape. Hiyori and Yukine join forces in saving the gods and making a run for the underworld doorway. Yato finds himself in trouble, and Ebisu tries to save Yato by offering to surrender. However, Yato is quite selfless himself and tells Ebisu to go live his life. Just as Ebisu makes an escape route by making a vent, Yato gets trapped by Izanami. Meanwhile, Bishamon also arrives to help Yato out. She had finally decided to leave the past behind her. These two are the only ones left in the underworld while Ebisu tries to figure out a way to bring them both back. According to him, the only way for Yato and Bishamon to return is by using a human, and Hiyori was just that. This method is called the Soul Call, and it involves a human crying out the real name of a god to bring them back from the underworld. It works to bring back Bishamon, however, the same didn't work for Yato, which proves that his real name isn't Yato. Hiyori reminds herself of the name that was engraved on Yato's shrine. She tries out that name and it turns out to be Yato's real name. Using his real name, she summons him back from the underworld. Unluckily, however, the Heaven's Punisher summons a pacification ring to kill Ebisu and Yato. Yato survives, however, the same couldn't be said for Ebisu. He ends up dying because of the attack. Yato realizes that Ebisu was a brave and selfless man, and he vows to be much more like him. He abandons his path as a god of calamity to take Ebisu's place as a god of fortune, with Yukine by his side. And finally, he sets free the Nora he always had as regalia. And that's the end of the video. Also, if you haven't actually watched this anime, at the very least, go look up its opening themes, they are bangers. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.